as the homes in some of these neighborhoods, especially like in what's labeled as District 2, but on the west side, as the history of this house is unique, but a lot of these homes being built at the turn of of 1900 up through, like, I guess I would say like the 30s. Unique builds. Like every house has like a different type of design.
Well, one of the things that we're very fortunate and very blessed to have in the city of Detroit is our architecture. So one of the things that you'll see is that Detroit has the largest capacity of single family homes inside of an urban city in the country. So, and because they were built the way that they were built, that they weren't built as subdivisions, they were built as individual homes, they all have their unique identity. But the biggest thing is that they are mostly brick homes and they are very stable homes. And the architecture and the intensity in which they were built, we'll never build this again. We just won't. We have the capacity for the craftsmanship and the people to do it. We don't have the education of how to do it, but plus fact, all of that becomes very expensive when you're building a piece of property. And so we just will never do it again, which is why you see on most subdivisions, you'll have brick that goes up about 4 feet and then everything else is some other kind of surface because things like that cost a lot to lay and to do in the craftsmanship. So we have a very unique city with a very unique architecture that has to be preserved.
Okay, so when you talk about preservation of it, just even in this home itself, as before my mom's passing, there was a lot of ideas that she had, and I had to like look through these old photos of like a lot of just even the wood in this home that's now painted over is like rare woods, unique woods, and how do you suggest for people like me that own homes in the city where it's some rare like windows, woods, brick, like who do you reach out to? Because I can't go to Home Depot for this stuff.
Well, no, and there are some people that are still refurbishing your wood windows. I don't know that that's necessarily the architecture that you have to, because you do want some sense of energy efficiency. So there are windows and like aluminum windows or whatever that look like wood that actually still have that same presence. But as far as the interior wood and the interior, there's a lot of places in the city of Detroit that actually would help you in preserving that, and stripping the wood and bringing it back to its natural state it really takes the detail back into the house.
As an architect, it's almost like I can nerd out with you on it. What was unique about a lot of these homes, since you've bounced around in different places? So let's start with the Sorrento home. What do you remember that stands out?
So our Outer Drive home, first of all, I remember that we had a house in the middle of the block. We lived on Outer Drive between Still and Sorrento. We actually had an extra lot, which is one of the things that the city is really into right now, selling these side lots so that residents have property around their houses. We actually had an extra lot. My grandmother, my grandfather on my father's side actually worked for Parks and Rec, and he used to build an ice skating rink for us in the wintertime on our lot, and the neighbors could come over and ice skate on our ice skating rink.
That is
next to our house.
That is very unique.
Right.
That is very unique. Is the good brother Herman Davis will be coming soon. That's the only skating I was doing as a child.
Right.
Roller skating.
Yeah. So we used to ice skate on that side lot, but it was actually part of our property. But the one thing I do remember again is the character of the house. It was unique. It didn't look like anybody else's house on the street. And I'm gonna tell a little bit of a story. When I was in architecture, my sophomore year, when I transferred from Tulane to Georgia Tech, as a black female, I was the only black female there was one other one starting with me, but I was one of 2 black females in the program. And I had a professor that actually came to me while he says, we're going to design a house. And I said, oh, okay. He says, so we're going to design a designer house. I said, okay. So in front of the class, he said, so I want you all to understand that when we design the house, that we're not designing those houses that some of you might be used to that have the same shutters on every house and the same garage door in the front of the house. And he looked at me and I said, okay, why is he looking at me? And then he made some other references to certain things about certain neighborhoods, and he kept referring those. Kim, do you understand that? So finally I said, well, why do you keep saying that? He says, well, I want you to understand that we are designing houses that aren't like your neighborhoods. And I said, what does that mean? He said, well, I know your typical neighborhoods in your urban cities that you might have grown up in would have been the same. They have different color shutters with the same houses. There are rows and rows of those houses. So I said, well, that's not where I grew up. I actually went home and took pictures of the house that my father designed and built in the city of Detroit and plastered it across my drafting table. He came back to the design lab and said, oh, this is really interesting. Where did you go get these pictures from? You've really done some, good research. I said, that would be my home. It's not the house that has the same shutters. I grew up in Detroit.
Detroit is Different is the home for a podcast covering the essence of Detroit's Black experience with history, business, dating, and comedy. Visit DetroitisDifferent.net and tune in to listen to what's happening in and around Detroit.